Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. Artur Beterbiev is undisputed world light heavyweight champion after a 12-round majority decision win over Dmitry Bivol. Now, before we talk about it, let's just get one thing straight right off the bat. No one, I repeat, no one has a definitive scorecard for this fight. So all these idiots out here claiming that damn near every round was easy to score one way or the other, knock it off. You're talking absolute rubbish. This was not that type of fight at all. For example, both guys landed one clean right hand each in the first round. Other than that, neither man landed anything of note. Yet there are people out here acting like Bivol absolutely dominated the first round, which is just absolute boss. There was literally nothing in it. It was absolutely razor close. Bivol threw a lot of jabs, but virtually all of them were blocked in the first round. Go watch it back. This was a fight with very few clean damaging headshots landed by either man, and therefore there were lots of very close rounds. This was not an action-packed contest at all. It was very much a purist fight. And so that brings me on to my first point. The thing that jumped out at me right away here was how similar Beterbiev and Bivol actually looked in the early going, as far as their posture and boxing construct. They were almost mirroring each other at times in terms of stance, hand positioning, foot positioning, and what have you. They both came through the same amateur system, obviously, and it really showed. What also showed here was the pedigree and ring IQ of both guys. The technique was absolutely impeccable. The offensive and defensive movements of both guys were freakishly precise in the early going, literally down to millimeters of precision. And that was a new experience for both of them in the pro ranks. Neither of them had fought anyone as skilled as the other in a professional fight. And that manifested in how careful they both were. You see, normally when either of these guys are in the ring, they can immediately spot weaknesses in their opponents, mentally, physically, and technically. They can see signs of nerves, confusion, or distress in the eyes, the face, and the body language of their opponents, and that gives them the green light to start leading off. They can also usually feint their opponents out of position, cause them to reach in with shots and leave themselves open, or use footwork to come in at a surprising angle and catch the opponent off guard. But in this fight, the openings were much harder to come by. And both guys were absolutely stone-faced and ice cold. Not even a flicker of emotion. And as I say, the movements of both men were so precise and the ring IQ was so high, they both knew that the tiniest little mistake, where they misjudged something by a fraction of an inch, could make the difference between winning a round or losing it, because there were so few opportunities for either man to land clean punches. What's so incredible about Artur Beterbiev as a pressure fighter is the fact that there is absolutely no wind-up on his punches whatsoever. I mean, literally none. He has refined his technique to such an extent that he's able to generate tremendous power without pulling his fist back even a millimeter, which is absolutely bizarre. It's a bit reminiscent of Joe Louis, in fact. As I say, immaculate technique. And this makes it very difficult to anticipate when Beterbiev's gonna punch, which is to his advantage, right? But paradoxically, it also has the effect of the audience overlooking a lot of his punches because they're delivered in such a subtle fashion. And when you combine that with the fact that Bivol kept his hands super glued to the sides of his head and his chin super glued to his chest, whenever Beterbiev managed to slot a punch through the middle of Bivol's guard, in many cases, it was not picked up on by the commentators or presumably the audience, because they were often landing on Bivol's brow. And because he had his chin so close to his chest, his head wasn't getting knocked back when the shots connected. And again, this gave the illusion that all of Beterbiev's punches were being blocked, but that's actually not the case at all. Some of them were being blocked, yes, and I'm sure some of the damage on Bivol's face was indeed caused by the inside of his own gloves, but some of it was also caused by direct impact from Beterbiev's fists. And this was not being picked up by a lot of people. Also, the slow motion replays that were shown between rounds, presumably selected by DAZN, the lead broadcaster, were biased in favor of Bivol. As you might expect, because Bivol is a DAZN fighter, and this helped to reinforce the perception that he was the only one landing anything. Bivol's work was a lot more flashy than Beterbiev's. He had the much faster hands, and he was able to catch Beterbiev with shots that were easier for the audience to see. But when you slow the fight down, you realize that he was missing with a fair few shots himself. A fair few of them were hitting gloves as well, especially the jab. But because his hand speed is such a blur at times, when you watch it in real time, you think they're all landing. But when you slow it down, you realize that a lot of those shots didn't actually connect. So the optics of the fight was somewhat misleading at times. You really had to watch very, very closely to see what was really going on. And this is why I'm not mad at other people's scorecards, because this fight required a very discerning eye and probably several viewings. I did not score this fight round by round when I watched it live, but the overall feeling I had at the end of 12 rounds was that Bivol had just edged it. But when I watched the fight again today and did score it, I had it 115-114 in favor of Beterbiev. This was the type of fight where if I watched it 3 different times, I might come up with a different scorecard each time. It really was that nip and tuck. Neither man was dropped, and neither man appeared to be seriously hurt at any point during the fight. And if they were, they hit it extremely well. Clean shots on the chin were almost non-existent in this contest. Both guys tended to land on the brow or on the side of the head above the ear and occasionally on the cheekbone, but very, very rarely on the chin. The level of defensive competence from both men was high. Both guys held their shape, their stance, their construct together very, very well also. But Bivol just started to get a bit ragged towards the end, and Beterbiev was able to capitalize on that. Judging by the poll I did on my channel and the reaction on social media, most people seem to be more impressed by the speed and athleticism of Bivol than the power and strength of Beterbiev. But honestly, the judges could have given it to either man and I wouldn't have complained. The reality is, it was far too close of a fight to have any gripes over the result. I've noticed that the experts are split. You've got Teddy Atlas, who scored it for Beterbiev, despite the fact that he picked Bivol to win, so he wasn't trying to defend any prediction. And then you've got Paulie Malignaggi and Sergio Mora, who think that Bivol won and was actually a bit hard done by. But I think there's some bias there stylistically. Malignaggi and Mora are both flashy movers, and as such, they both tend to score fights in favor of those types of fighters, even when it's often more style than substance. Anyway, there was definitely no robbery here, folks. That really is the most overused term in boxing. It's silly. No, this was a razor close fight. They'll probably run it back, and hopefully we get a more definitive winner next time. So those are my thoughts. Leave yours in the comments below. And before I go, I just uploaded this marathon career review on Riddick Bowe. It's over 2 hours long of me commenting on footage of his most significant fights. If you want to access this video along with hundreds of hours worth of other exclusive boxing content, as well as our members chat, just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called the Boxing Brotherhood. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store. All the links are in the description box below.